She taught 5-year-olds to read for 38 years. She arrived at school before the custodians and stayed until the hallways went quiet, because a child who is trying to understand why letters make sounds deserves more than the 45 minutes the schedule allows. She spent her own money on books when the classroom budget ran out, which was every year. She told every child who sat in her room the same thing: stories are doors, and a door will take you anywhere if you're brave enough to walk through. She had a travel board on the wall of her living room for 40 years. Italy at the center. Magazine cutouts and printed photographs of places she was going to go someday, when the timing was right, when the money was there, when the furnace didn't break during the coldest week of the year. She was 71 years old. The board was still on the wall. She had not been to Italy. What Dorothy Calloway did not know, what nobody in East Orange, New Jersey knew on a Saturday morning in March, was that a former student had seen a 3-minute local news segment, and that a teacher named Patricia Eze had written one paragraph to a foundation contact form, and that Shaquille O'Neal had read that paragraph at 6 a.m. and had not put it down for a long time. What happened next was not a check in the mail. It was a knock on a door on Dodd Street, and 4 words, and a folder with 14 days of Italy inside it. And it was a woman sitting down on her porch step in her housecoat, and finally, after 40 years, allowing herself to cry. The local news segment aired on a Thursday evening in late February, part of a series the station ran called Newark Made, profiling people who had grown up in the city and built something meaningful from it. The segment on Shaquille O'Neal ran 7 minutes, covered the new community center announcement, touched on the championship years, and at the 4-minute mark asked him a question the interviewer had added at the last moment, because it seemed like the kind of thing that would land. "Is there a teacher who shaped you?" He answered without hesitating. "Dorothy Calloway," he said. 1st grade. Queensbridge Elementary. Fall of 1977. He was 5 years old and enormous for his age, and already self-conscious about the space he took up in rooms designed for smaller people. She was the first adult outside his family who made him feel like his size was not the first thing about him. She put a book in his hands. He no longer remembered the title. Something about a bear, he thought, with a red cover, and she sat beside him and read it with him slowly, not impatiently, not performing patience, but genuinely unhurried, as if the two of them had all the time in the world to figure out what those marks on the page meant together. She told him that stories were doors. He said he thought about that sentence at least once a month for the rest of his life. The segment moved on. It covered the community center. It ended with a clip of Shaq laughing at something off camera. Patricia Eze watched the segment from her living room in Newark, where she had been teaching 3rd grade at Queensbridge Elementary for 11 years. She had known Miss Dot for the last 9 of those, had eaten lunch with her in the teacher's lounge, had asked her questions about classroom management that Miss Dot answered with the specific authority of someone who had solved the problem the questioner was still framing, had attended Miss Dot's retirement celebration in 2016, and watched her open the envelope from her sister with the $4,200 in it, and watched her face when she understood what it was for. She knew about the furnace. She knew about 2009, and the Professional Development Fund, and Gerald Voss. She knew about the travel board, because she had been in that living room twice, once for a dinner that turned into a 4-hour conversation about everything, and once to help carry boxes from Miss Dot's car when she moved a piece of furniture, and the board was unmissable. The thing dominated the wall. Italy at the center, as if placed there by some organizing principle of longing. She sat with the segment for a while after it ended. She thought about Miss Dot in that house on Dodd Street with the travel board and the $400 savings account, and the knees that had been troubling her for 2 years. She thought about the window on a walking trip through Rome not being infinite, which was a thing Miss Dot had said out loud exactly once, at lunch, in the tone of someone making an observation rather than a complaint, and which Patricia had not forgotten, because the things people say in that tone are always the ones that matter. She went to the Shaq Foundation website and found the contact form. She wrote 1 paragraph. She did not ask for anything. She said, "I thought you should know." What nobody at the Shaq Foundation knew, when Patricia's message came through the contact form on a Thursday night, was that it would reach Shaquille O'Neal himself the following morning, because his foundation director, Angela Reyes, had a standing instruction to flag any message that referenced a specific named individual from his childhood with any level of detail. Angela flagged it. She sent it at 5:47 a.m. He read it at 6:03. But before we get to what he did when he read it, you need to understand who Dorothy Calloway is and what it actually costs to teach 5-year-olds in a Newark public school for 38 years while keeping a travel board on your wall that you never stop believing in, even when the furnace decides otherwise. Dorothy Mae Calloway was born in Birmingham, Alabama, in 1953, the eldest of 6 children in a household where her mother cleaned houses and her father worked at a steel plant, and the money was always being redistributed in real time to wherever the gap had opened that week. She was a reader from the age of 4, which in her household meant she was a child who could be trusted to sit quietly with a book while the people around her handled the things that needed handling. A useful quality that she understood, even young, was being praised for the convenience it created, rather than the wonder it represented. She went north at 17 on a Greyhound bus with $110 and her cousin's address in Newark, and the specific determination of a person who has decided that their life will be larger than the container they were handed. She got a job in a department store. She enrolled in night classes at Essex County College. She finished her degree at Keene University in 1975, student teaching in the Newark public schools the last 2 years, and was hired at Queensbridge Elementary in the fall of 1977, the same fall that a 5-year-old boy named Shaquille walked through her classroom door. She taught first grade for 38 years. In that time, she taught more than 900 children to read. She spent an average of $600 of her own money per year on classroom supplies, books, primarily, but also construction paper, glue, pencils, and occasionally breakfast items from the corner store for the children she could see were hungry, which she bought without documenting, because documentation would have required explanation, and explanation would have made it a thing rather than simply a thing. She did. Over 38 years, that was approximately $22,800 of her own money. She did not calculate this. The number existed, but she never added it up, because she was not keeping score. She was teaching. She had wanted to travel since she was young, not because she was restless or dissatisfied, because she was a person who loved stories, and the world beyond Newark was full of them, and she wanted to see where they happened. Italy specifically because of a book she had read in 1983, A History of Florence and the Painters Who Had Made It Permanent, and because of the specific sensation of reading about Michelangelo's ceiling in a Newark apartment in January, and feeling the pull of a world where a person could stand in that chapel and look up and be inside the original of something, rather than a reproduction. She put Italy at the center of the travel board in 1984. She was 31. She believed she would get there. The first time she came close was 2009. The Newark School District, under a new administrator, had created a small discretionary professional development fund for veteran educators, $3,000 available for international travel that could be documented as cultural enrichment curriculum research. Miss Dodd applied. Her application was thorough and well-reasoned. She proposed a unit on Renaissance art history for her first graders, simplified and visual, built around paintings and stories. The application was approved. 3 weeks before her departure date, the fund was frozen. Gerald Voss, the school board's director of finance, had committed the district to a facilities lease for its athletics program that had come due at the same moment as the professional development disbursements. He reallocated the professional development funds to cover the lease. He sent a form letter to the educators whose applications had been approved. The letter expressed regret and said the funds would be reinstated in the following budget year. They were not reinstated in the following budget year. Miss Dot received the form letter on a Tuesday, read it standing at her mailbox, folded it back into its envelope, and went inside and made dinner. She did not discuss it. She did not complain. She added it to the list of things that had not worked out the way they were supposed to and kept teaching, because the children in her classroom did not care what Gerald Voss had done with the Professional Development Fund, and they deserved the same quality of instruction regardless. The second time was 2019. Her sister had spent 6 months quietly collecting contributions from family members, cousins, nieces, nephews, Miss Dot's oldest friends. And at the retirement celebration, toward the end of the evening when the cake had been cut and the speeches had been given, her sister stood up and handed her an envelope. Inside was $4,200. The card said, "For Italy." No arguments. Miss Dot held the envelope for a long time. She thanked her sister in a way that did not involve words, because the words were not available to her at that moment. 7 months later, in January, the furnace in the house on Dodd Street failed during a cold snap that drove temperatures to 9 degrees and stayed there for a week. The replacement cost $3,800. She moved $3,800 out of the Italy envelope and into a checking account and called the vac company and scheduled the installation. She put the remaining $400 in a savings account. She still had it. She did not take the travel board down. Shaq read Patricia's paragraph at 6:03 in the morning and did not move for a while. He was sitting in his kitchen in Los Angeles, with the phone in his hand and the paragraph on the screen, and he read it 3 times, each time arriving at the same place, at a woman in East Orange with a travel board on her wall and $400 in a savings account, standing at a mailbox with a form letter, moving $3,800 from one account to another in January so the pipes wouldn't freeze. He thought about a red-covered book and a woman who was not impatient. He thought about what it means to be 5 years old and already aware that the space you take up is something other people are deciding how to feel about, and to have a teacher who decides in those first weeks that you are not a problem to be managed, but a person to be known. He thought about the sentence, "Stories are doors," and the specific quality of that sentence, which was not a motivational poster sentence, not something said to fill a morning meeting, but a thing that had been placed in his hands by someone who believed it completely and needed him to believe it too. He thought about 38 years of that belief applied to 900 children in a Newark public school. He thought about $22,800 in books and breakfast items bought out of a teacher's salary that was not large to begin with. He thought about the professional development application, thorough, well-reasoned. A first-grade unit on Renaissance art history. Approved and then unfunded by a form letter from a man who had a lease commitment and a line item to balance. He thought about an envelope with $4,200 and a card that said "For Italy, no arguments," and a furnace that did not care about any of that. He thought about a travel board on a wall since 1984. 40 years. He had walked through more doors than he could count, in arenas and boardrooms and cities around the world, and the first person who had ever told him that doors were real and that he was allowed to walk through them was a woman in East Orange, New Jersey, who had never walked through the one she had been saving for longest. He thought, "That ends today." He called Angela Reyes at 6:22 a.m. She picked up on the second ring. "I need to plan a trip," he said. He described it specifically. Not a general trip. Not a gift card. 14 days. Rome, Florence, Amalfi, private guided tours, no large groups, no rushing, no schedule that a woman with troubling knees could not keep comfortably. A travel companion, because she should not go alone, Patricia Eze, the teacher who had written the paragraph. Because Patricia had earned the seat by making the call, and because Miss Dot would need someone who knew her. First-class flights. A car from East Orange to Newark Liberty on the departure day. Angela said she would handle it. He said there was one more thing. "I'm going to deliver it myself," he said. "Don't tell her anything." He knocked on the door of the house on Dodd Street on a Saturday morning 18 days later at 9:15, when the light was still low and the street was quiet and a neighbor's dog was making a considered argument about something 2 houses down. He was carrying a folder, cream-colored, thick with pages, with the complete itinerary inside. A personal letter he had written by hand the night before, and then typed because his handwriting was not equal to the occasion, and 2 round-trip first-class tickets departing Newark Liberty International in 18 days. Miss Dot opened the door in her housecoat and reading glasses, with a coffee cup in her hand and the expression of a woman who had been awake for some time already and was deep inside a Saturday morning that had not yet required anything of her. She looked at the person on her porch. She did not say anything for a moment. Not because she didn't recognize him. Because she did. Immediately and completely, and recognition, when it arrives at that scale, in that context, on a Saturday morning in a housecoat on Dodd Street, requires a beat of adjustment. The 5-year-old boy and the 7-foot man. 38 years of teaching and the specific disorientation of a present that arrives as an echo of something very old. She said, finally, Shaquille. He said, very quietly, it's time, Miss Dot. He held out the folder. She looked at it. She set her coffee cup on the small wooden table beside the door. It had sat there for so long it had left a ring in the paint, and she took the folder with both hands. She opened it. She read it standing in the doorway. He stood on the porch and did not speak, because she was a reader and readers need silence. And he knew this about her from the first time she had ever sat beside him with a book. She read the Rome pages first. 4 nights. Private guided tour of the Vatican. Morning. Before the crowds. The Colosseum at dusk. A dinner reservation at a restaurant in Trastevere that had been in the same family since 1923. She read it the way she had read everything for 50 years. Completely. With full attention, not rushing to the end. She turned to Florence. 4 nights. The Uffizi. A private early morning slot before the gallery opened to the public. A day in the Tuscan countryside. An evening in Fiesole, above the city, watching the sun go behind the hills. She turned to the Amalfi section. 6 nights. A private boat day along the coast. Positano, Ravello, with its gardens above the sea. The drive along the cliff roads she had looked at in photographs for 40 years. She turned to the letter. She read it twice. Then she looked up, not at him, but past him, through the open door, at the living room wall behind her. He turned slightly and saw it for the first time. The travel board. 40 years of magazine cutouts and printed photographs, corners curling gently where the tape had dried, colors faded at the edges where the light came in through the front window every morning. Italy at the center. A photograph of the Colosseum. A cutout of the Amalfi Cliffs from a magazine that had probably ceased publication years ago. A postcard-sized image of the Uffizi's main corridor, the paintings reduced to suggestions at that scale but the geometry of the hall unmistakable. She looked at it for a long time. The dog 2 houses down had reached a resolution and gone quiet. The street was very still. Then Miss Dot sat down on her porch step. Just sat down, right there in her housecoat, with the folder held carefully in both hands, and the March morning coming in off Dodd Street. And she cried. Not small, careful tears, the kind a person produces when they have decided to cry in a controlled way. The other kind. The kind that arrives without permission, that has been waiting a long time for the right moment. That comes when something you stopped letting yourself want has been handed back to you whole. He sat down beside her on the step. He said the thing he had decided to say before he drove from the airport to East Orange. He said it quietly, in the way that the most important things in these moments are always said, not announced, not performed, but placed. You told me stories were doors. I've been walking through them my whole life. This one's yours. She did not say anything. After a moment, she put her hand over his, briefly, the way a teacher touches a student's hand when the student has finally gotten something right that has been hard for a long time. The touch that means, yes, exactly, that's it. That was enough. Gerald Voss was 67 years old and retired in Montclair when the story ran. A short feature on the local news station that had done the original Newark-made segment, reporting that Shaquille O'Neal had sent his first-grade teacher on the Italy trip she had dreamed of for 40 years. The segment mentioned the 2009 Professional Development Fund. It did not mention Gerald Voss by name. It described the circumstances in a single sentence. The fund was reallocated to cover an athletics facility commitment before Miss Dot could collect. He recognized the circumstances. He had not thought about that form letter in years. It had been a budget decision, one of dozens made under pressure that year, and he had made it the way budget decisions get made when the money has to go somewhere and the somewhere has to be chosen. He had not thought about the educators on the other side of the letters. He had thought about the line items. He sat with the segment for a long time after it ended. He called the current district superintendent the following Monday. He made a personal donation of $15,000. He asked that it be used to restart the Professional Development Travel Fund for veteran educators. He asked, specifically, that it be called the Dorothy Calloway Enrichment Award. He sent a letter to Miss Dot. He did not ask for her forgiveness. He explained what had happened, and said he was sorry it had, and that he had not thought carefully enough at the time about what the fund meant to the people who had applied for it. He said he hoped the donation was useful. Miss Dot received the letter in Florence, forwarded by her sister, on the 6th day of the trip. She was sitting on a terrace above the Arno River, eating lunch, watching a man on a bicycle navigate a narrow street below with the focused calm of someone who had been navigating that particular street for decades. She read the letter. She folded it. She put it in the journal she was keeping and went back to her lunch and the river. She was not in the business of holding things. She had taught children for 38 years. She knew that holding things was expensive, and that the carrying left no hands free for anything else. She brought the journal home at the end of 14 days, slightly sunburned on her forearms, with a small ceramic pitcher she had bought in Positano that was too fragile to pack and had to be hand-carried through 2 airports, and with the specific quality of stillness that belongs to a person who has done something they had only imagined for so long, that the imagining and the doing have finally agreed with each other. She donated the journal to Queensbridge Elementary. Patricia Eze laminated it and put it in the school library with a placard that said it was available to borrow. It circulated the way the best things in libraries circulate, steadily, without fanfare, from one reader to the next. A 6-year-old girl named Amara borrowed it on a Tuesday. She carried it home in her backpack in a plastic bag, so it wouldn't get wet if it rained, which was a precaution nobody had asked her to take. She returned it the following Monday, on time, with a drawing tucked inside the front cover. The drawing was of a door. It was open. Miss Dot kept the drawing. She put it on the travel board when she got home, right at the center, over the photograph of the Colosseum, because she had seen the Colosseum now with her own eyes, and what she needed at the center of the wall from that point forward was not a picture of a place she was trying to reach, but a picture of a door that a child had drawn open. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city and country in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If this story moved you, even just a little, hit that like button. It takes 1 second, but it helps more people find stories like this one. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and tap that bell so you never miss another video. But here's the most important thing I'll ask you today. Share this video. Send it to your mom. Send it to the teacher who believed in you first. And to someone who needs to hear that the people who opened doors for you before you knew what doors were deserved to have one opened for them. Because kindness is free. And sharing it costs nothing. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Content Big Shaq Script Framework _Final. MDMD.